Welcome to Creative Distillation, where we distill entrepreneurship research into actionable insights. My name's Jeff York. I'm the research director at the Deming Center for Entrepreneurship at the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado, also a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship. And we are here today at Boxcar Roasters. If you could be here, you would smell the wonderful aromas of roasting coffee. Unfortunately, we're here on a Friday afternoon where we really should have been at the distillery, Brad, don't you think?
I totally agree.
I know my co-host, Brad Werner, is most disappointed with this location.
You know what? You know I love the distilleries.
Yes.
I love them.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the introductions and actually looking at some of our prior work.
Oh, my goodness. You should never do that, Brad.
I know, but I had to. And I think that my title is way too long. So what I'd like to just say is that I'm Brad Werner, and I'm an entrepreneur.
You are.
Right.
But that's if you've listened to any of our prior podcasts, you know that's way undescriptive of Brad. Brad has been an entrepreneur in like virtually every segment of the economy, and those that he has not been an entrepreneur in, he's been heavily invested in at one point or another.
That's true.
My view of his experience when Brad, and now Brad is our teaching director at the Deming Center of Entrepreneurship, which is wonderful because we get this great blend of people with a more academic, research-based background and people who have actually done this successfully, folks like Brad. So I think that gives our students the best of both worlds.
And you know what, Jeff? Totally. When you think about the complete experience and what Sharon, who's going to be joining us later, has worked towards to have students come in, and I'm plugging the university here for a second. But you have students come in their first couple of years, really work on fundamentals,
Absolutely.
and then take those fundamentals and then put them into practice.
Yeah.
I really think that differentiates our program from what many of the programs are doing around the country.
Yep.
And I think that we get validated, number one, by the number of businesses that come out of the school, but two, entrepreneurship is not all about starting businesses. Right? And the creative thinking and the horsepower, the mental horsepower that comes out of here, I think is just fantastic.
I completely agree, and I'm humbled by it every semester when I'm teaching and see these students trying and some succeeding and others not succeeding, but learning a heck of a lot in the process. So it's really cool.
And we're learning.
Oh, absolutely. And so we're also learning how to do a podcast as we go along.
Yes,
we are. So again, here on Creative Distillation, as always, if it's your first time listening, welcome. We attempt to take insights from entrepreneurship research and then try to kind of boil it down to like, why is this interesting to an entrepreneur, an investor, or a teacher? And Brad plays all three of those roles. So he's sort of
think about this, though. It's certainly for the entrepreneurs that are listening or watching our performance here. That the bottom line is you're looking for tools to help you. Right. They all have these different challenges, and the challenges are as big as the rainbow.
Right.
And so how can we actually identify specific research that hopefully translated, can help the person on the street trying to accomplish, grow their business, scale, start, whatever the heck piece of the lifestyle.
And so that's what's so cool about the paper we're going to be talking about today. A fresh look at patterns and assumptions in the field of entrepreneurship. What can we learn? By Gary Dushnitsky and our own Sharon F Matusik, the dean of the Leeds School of Business and also a professor in strategy and entrepreneurship.
So for my first thought is, what does the F stand for? Francis.
There we go. We already learned
something we were learning already today.
Yes,
I think that's beautiful.
So let's. What we want to do, as always on Creative Distillation, what we first do is we taste some kind of a liquid beverage. I guess if we were tasting liquids that weren't beverages, that would be kind of disturbing and quite odd. But yeah, we're going to be tasting, today we're tasting coffee from Boxcar Roastery. And we're going to be talking to their founder, Vajra, about the business, how it came about. And we'll bring Sharon in and we'll taste a few things. And then we'll talk about this paper and see. I didn't mention, what's so cool about this paper is it's actually completely and utterly aligned with the podcast. Well, it is a call for how we can have what the paper refers to as dual discussions between practitioners and entrepreneurship scholars to have more impactful, interesting, and frankly, modern research.
Okay, so right there, you're losing most of the entrepreneurs out there when they're thinking dual discussions. It's like, what the hell?
Well, okay. Yeah. A conversation. How about that?
Okay, a conversation works for me. And I love it that Sharon's here, and I think she'll set us both straight.
It's going to be great. So let's get some coffee in here because, it's Friday afternoon, and nothing says end of the work week like drinking coffee.
Or bourbon and coffee.
Well, yeah, but today we're drinking coffee.
A little bit.
Great, so we're back, and let's go ahead and bring our guests in. Our first guest is Sharon F Matusik. We just found out the F stands for Francis, which is not something we knew as faculty members, so we're very excited about that. She is our dean, as well as professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at the Leeds School of Business. Thanks for joining us, Sharon.
My pleasure.
And we're going to be talking about her paper in just a bit, but first, we're going to be talking to our host for the day. Vajra is the founder of Boxcar Coffee Roasters, where we are lucky enough to be situated here in lovely Boulder today. So Vajra, like we were talking earlier, you started this off by actually roasting the coffee yourself.
I did. That's correct. I should say I'm a co-founder.
Oh, I apologize.
No, it's okay. I didn't let you know. I started Boxcar with my wife, Cara.
Cool.
Her name was Cara Baker. She did take my last name for some reason. We don't know why. I just followed that pattern,
right.
I guess. But she grew up here and I grew up here. And we started the company together along with a friend of ours. He was our only employee. Mm-hmm. His name is Janos Porps, and he also grew up here too.
Great.
So did you identify a market need, or did you just say, you know what, I love coffee, we can do it better?
This is a good, it was the latter. Mm-hmm. The latter because I just really wanted to. I couldn't think of anything else to do. I was not a business. I didn't think about business. I didn't think about making money. I didn't think about being a success at all, actually. A lot of people warned me against it, but I just felt compelled,
right?
I should say.
Yeah.
I guess I saw a need for, or at least a space for someone to do their best. You know, it felt like coffee was, in Boulder was a little bit more like, it had there's a lot of coffee shops here. But coming from the Northwest, which is where I was living before I moved here, there was just some more attention being paid to it, and as you would a good meal or a nice bottle of wine, or more, I guess I would say producing wine.
Right.
Careful attention to things. I felt like there's a lot of room for improvement. Also, that's just the way I am.
Right.
And I just wanted to do something well.
Very cool.
Well, I have to tell you, Vajra, for the people that are listening that are not from Boulder, this is a Boulder gem. This is not screwing around. Everybody that I know that we give this coffee to has us send it to them at Christmas, Thanksgiving, all the holidays. This is really, really, you've changed people's lives for the better. In the morning, a little less grumpy maybe, something's going on, but it's pretty good.
Thank you so
congrats.
much. That's like the best compliment, really.
Yeah,
really.
And it's true. It's true.
Well, absolutely. And so when did Boxcar start?
We started in 2010 in May, so we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary.
Oh, right. That's great.
We started just as a roasting business, so we just had a few customers that would buy whole bean roasted coffee from us, and we always wanted to open a retail space or a space where people could come and experience it more in depth. Right. And I also just like cafes, so about a year later we opened our spot on Pearl Street at 1825, and we brought the roaster with us and put it in there, and we roasted all the coffee for our wholesale customers out of the back, out of this little room in the back.
Yeah.
And we put all the coffee in that we had to bag up in our wholesale bagging operation was like in a hallway in the back of the place.
Nice.
And we used to have to take our deliveries of our green coffee, which come in pretty big, heavy bags. I don't know if you've ever seen them. It was like 150-pound sacks of coffee through a very narrow hallway, and and in the snow and in the ice, and it was definitely it's a good story anyway. Right. It feels like we came a long way.
Well, I think about the metrics too. In the metrics, we talk about sometimes the businesses that come out of CU and especially at Leeds. Mm-hmm. But think about all the businesses that were developed in your coffee shop. I would imagine that it's really a long list.
Yeah. In fact, I recognize so many people around town, and I wonder, they're one of our goals was to provide we intentionally tried not to put too many outlets in there for people to plug their computers in. We wanted people to have conversations in there, and that was really important to us. So finding an old building with like nice natural materials and real brick and then real wood floor, that was like a big deal to us. And and tried to make all the tables sort of small so you couldn't set up an office in there.
Right.
Well, you're developing your brand.
Yeah, but I think it worked, right? People like to spend time there. They like to talk to each other. And
absolutely worked. Yeah. I mean, like I can think of how many times entrepreneurs or investors I've wanted to talk to have suggested me at Boxcar. Yeah. It's almost like you go in there in the morning, you can almost see deals getting done. It's
it's kind of amazing. This was not part of my idea. That's totally great, though.
I know, that's what's so interesting is your intent was just to make great coffee and create a place of community.
That was it.
But I think people gravitate to a place of authenticity.
Yeah.
Especially when they're making big, important discussions, making an important decision. Being in a sense of place can make you feel more comfortable, more able to feel like you're communicating honestly.
And a creative space.
And a creative space,
Right.
yeah.
Really
Which is
changes.
another aspect we want to talk about. It's not just a cafe.
Right.
So
I
how
think
did that
that's a
come
big.
about?
So when we first were thinking about moving to a retail location or a downtown location, not a friend, but sort of a mutual acquaintance, Brett Zimmerman owns a wine merchant in Boulder up by the Ideal Market. And, he knew Will Frischkorn and Coral Ferguson, who were just moving back to Boulder and wanted to open their sort of charcuterie wine shop, meat and cheese place. Olive oil, all the stuff that's in there. And they wanted to have some local craft coffee roasters coffee on the shelves of their eventual store.
Right.
And so Brett introduced us, and within a week, we were looking for space to share together. It just made sense.
Right.
I think very European.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, and this was 10 years ago almost now, but the per square foot cost of a retail space on Pearl Street is hard to do.
Yeah.
And this is something I'd love to talk all about, but
Right.
there are reasons why Boulder's special, and I fear the loss of that if we have only big corporations that can afford those spaces. So splitting that space with Will and Coral made it a bite-sized piece in a sense. Well, it seemed like no way we were ever going to be able to afford it actually, but still, it was half what the space would have cost.
Well, and you get outside of Boulder, you go downtown to some of these communities now, it's either banks or real estate offices.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, I'd love to find a way to make sure that doesn't spread.
That's a tough one. I
know
we
it
all
is.
would.
We'll save that for the podcast with bourbon.
Well, speaking of which, let's taste a coffee.
Oh yeah, please. So I didn't pour too much because I know it's late in the day.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you, this is a coffee from Burundi. Am I talking too close to the mic there? Should I not say that word? Coffee from Burundi. So this time of year, it's very, I don't know, green coffee is kind of sparse. We only use fresh coffee. So we don't have coffee sitting around here. It goes stale. It loses moisture and it doesn't taste very good. So right now is the time of year when there's not a lot of fresh green coffee available. Green, I mean unroasted. So,
How long can you keep green coffee on the shelf before you need to roast it?
so in a stable environment with the temperature not fluctuating too much, and these are all inside these burlap sacks in here, but they're inside that they're in a plastic
They are.
bag to keep the moisture from leaving, especially in this dry climate. We don't like to keep anything around for more than 6 months here. And so we try to make sure we plan ahead and roast just enough, or order or buy or contract just enough green coffee that will go through it by that 6 months.
How many? What about sustainability issues in your buying decision of green beans?
So what we try to do and what we've been building for years, and we only have one really great success story about this, but we're still working on it, is a sort of year after year working with the same farm. So we have countries we prefer coffees from certain countries, and we try to work with those countries specifically, and then farmers more specifically. So our most long-term, in fact, been with us the whole time, was his name is Mauricio Salaverria. He's from El Salvador, and his farms are there, and we've been buying coffee from him, so 9 years now.
Great.
So
Awesome.
that way we can visit the farms, we can see their process, we know what they need from us, we know what we can tell them what we would like them to give us, and it's a conversation rather than just a commodity thing that you get from a mass importer. So these are small farms.
Okay.
So sustainability, we know if they're running into trouble. Here's a good example. So in that country in particular, the climate is changing. It's warming, and there's a sort of a fungus that's growing on the leaves of the coffee trees, and it's getting in the way of photosynthesis, and therefore the cherries don't ripen and the coffee doesn't taste good. So their whole coffee crop is very,
Oh my God.
it's very, it's on edge. So we're trying to help figure out ways in which we can still, support research into different varieties that handle that better, that still taste good. So, sustainability goes a lot further than, for us anyway, than getting a coffee that has a certified stamp on it. Because that doesn't really do much for us, honestly. A lot of those stamps don't mean much.
And you're preaching to the choir, I think, at this table.
Yeah, no, we know a lot more about what's going on with those farms than Fair Trade sticker. And I'm not trying to talk badly about them.
No.
They did a lot for the coffee industry and for farmers. So it's not that. It's just we pay like twice their minimum or more. So it's a whole other story.
So tasting coffee, other than, hey, wake me up in the morning, what are we looking for?
Well, there's definitely a trend with what I guess I don't like to say that we're one of these coffee roasters, but we could call us a third wave coffee company. So the second wave was when people got into espresso, Starbucks. Starbucks kind of helped start this whole thing by getting people interested in the coffee itself, rather than it just being commodity thing, right?
Thing I drink to wake up.
Right. And, basically what we're looking for is, we have so many detailed notes. This one here says mango, fig, and fudge. These are flavor notes that you'd find in this particular coffee. Oh, this is coffee from Mauricio. This is one of his newer varieties that he's trying to grow that's seeming to be resistant to the leaf rust.
Oh, interesting.
So we're looking for sweetness. Coffee's got bitterness no matter what, so it's always a little bit, but you want it in balance, just like anything that's tasty. Balance of like a sweetness, a roundness, a full body, but also some acidity, some citric acid, some malic or tartaric acid. These are things you find in coffee. Africa, this coffee in particular, you'll get citric, but you also get a little bit of like, blackberry kind of tartness.
Yeah, it's on the back end. Like you get that almost acidic tart afterbite.
Right.
And then I'm noticing the mouthfeel of this.
Yeah.
Like it feels more viscous, like thicker than I'm used to in my normal. Am I just crazy?
Yes. No, you're not. Well, there's two different things.
Well, that might be, but not about this.
Not about this. Well, I'm definitely crazy too, so we're in good company. Well, there's brewing methods that affect the body of the coffee. This one, I used what's called a French press, which you've heard of. Also, this roasting style, so we don't dark roast coffee. Dark roasting coffee does give you the opportunity to buy less quality because you won't taste the defects. If there's a bunch of underripe coffee in this,
it's like craft brewing an IPA where you just dump a ton of hops in.
Just put it in there.
Hey, it tastes
it's
like
hops.
hops.
Really blows your mind. Dark roasted coffee, it can be done well. I'm not also disparaging dark roasted coffee, but a very well prepped, well grown, well roasted, medium roast, you'll get lots of syrupy mouthfeel. Whereas a darker roasted coffee is a little darker roasted coffee has that sort of like that bite and a little bit of bitterness, but it's also kind of light and thin in body. It's a funny thing.
And that's what I normally drink, so that totally explains why I'd be having a different experience.
Body decreases as the roast gets darker.
And would you say that French press is the best process for someone at home looking for the type of flavor profile that you were discussing?
Well, there's two. Okay, so that's people just, this is like the endless debate. But I find that French press it's a little more forgiving for most people. The key to everything is the ratio of coffee to water. People sort of don't pay attention to that too much. We're finding that it's like baking and that you can't just put in less flour. The thing gets ruined.
A tablespoon is a tablespoon.
So there's a certain amount of water that's needed for the soluble compounds in that coffee to be dissolved into the liquid. So if you don't put enough water in, it won't happen. And then you'll get what we call under-extracted coffee, which is out of balance. So I like French press if you get your water ratios right. There is oil and there is little texture, so that will coat your tongue. You may not pick up on the super subtle flavor notes, but I think it's hard to pick up super subtle flavor notes for most folks anyway. A paper-filtered coffee, if also done with the perfect brew ratio, you can get a little bit more of the acidity profile. Like, I do taste a little bit of grape, a little bit of citrus. I can see those two things are there.
Okay, I've never tasted grape or citrus in my coffee.
You haven't looked for it.
I haven't, though. That's right.
But wine...
Yes.
Well, there's definitely grape in wine. You taste that, right? But sometimes you'll see those descriptors for a wine, and you're like, wow, really?
I got a chocolate flavor with this one.
Definitely chocolate.
Yeah, big time. In front. Bittersweet chocolate almost.
Yep. And you'll find some acidity there beyond, right? So a little bit of brightness to go with that bittersweet chocolate.
So I'm very unsophisticated because I taste coffee.
Yeah. Well, you're a brute. We knew that was.
You know what? That's okay with me, and that's always been okay
As
with
long
me.
as you're buying the
And then
roast.
if you finish it and you're like satisfied and you liked that cup of coffee, I think there's a lot of that's the best thing that could come. That's the best outcome, really.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't leave going, man, I need to chaser or something.
Yeah.
And I overthink everything, so it's nice not to overthink my coffee because then I would actually just go nuts.
But you're going to now.
Yes, I am.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you very much for the tasting and teaching Brad how not to be such a non-considerate coffee drinker.
That's right.
We'll keep on him about that. This is reminding me of our CBD chocolate tasting, except for it's having the opposite effect on me.
That is so true.
CBD.
Yeah.
There's a really cool company over here on Walnut called Extract Labs. They're
yeah.
They're making CBD out of organic hemp grown in Colorado.
Right. I've seen
And
them.
so I was talking to them about making a beverage, a CBD beverage.
So what do you
that would be
think
really
about-
interesting. A CBD.
It's like the combination.
Yeah, that
Interesting.
might be like a nice.
the science.
Yeah, what about a CBD coffee? Is that on your radar?
I think it needs to be a ready to drink beverage because it needs to be dissolved.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
And I think that there's certain things that it dissolves better into or it mixes
Right.
better with. I'm into chemistry, so I feel like it's just fun to figure out. I don't know if
I met the founder last night of a CBD roasted nut company. So there you go. He's figured out some way to roast.
It coats the nuts.
Yeah.
Seriously?
What's that called? Numb nuts?
Yep, that's what it's called. That's actually the name of the company.
I saw that on the shelf, and I was like, that's a
I
good
know.
one.
I literally saw it on the shelf on my way to go to play poker with some folks, and then the founder was there with a hat on, and I was like, well, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's this." And then this guy comes over. He's like, "Your CBD nuts are making me lose at poker."
That's a good name.
Anyway, but thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, we
great.
really
It's
appreciate it.
really cool to learn some of the history because I think your Pearl Street location opened just after I came here and started my job at Leeds. And it is my go-to place to take potential entrepreneurship faculty because I feel like it's the place where you most get a sense of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Boulder. Whether it's through your own intent or not, you've really added something to the community. And of course, your product is amazing. It's delicious.
I appreciate
Thank you
that
so
very much.
I have a question though. When we were talking, when I was first coming on to the university, Jeff, you took me to McDonald's.
Yeah. Well, that was that's where we take the people we're hoping are going to say no.
An entrepreneur started that one too.
I think we went to Snooze.
No, I'm teasing.
I remember that conversation. Anyway, thank you very much, Vajra. We appreciate you having us here. This is awesome.
It's really
Thank you.
incredible.
I should say that I fully encourage, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this, and I fully encourage people to try out whatever they feel really passionate about because, maybe I just got lucky, but I've had some mistakes. We opened another coffee shop, didn't work.
Sure.
So I've learned a lot from that.
Right.
And almost, it brought me to really appreciate what we did when we first started the thing. And now I know that if I wanted to do some other business or some other version of Boxcar or some other combination of things, I would want to only do it if I really, really wanted to do it. And I think that's the key to this.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot in the classroom of we're not trying to make everyone be an entrepreneur.
No.
We're just trying to, if you find something that you actually really want to do and you really are the right person to do it and you have a passion for this and we're trying to help you get there.
Yeah.
But our goal is not for us to come up with an idea, be an entrepreneur. I think you have to have that passion or be really, really, really lucky. Otherwise, otherwise you just can't make it. But,
I was basically, I was completely driven to do this thing. I didn't take into consideration the risks.
Yeah.
I didn't care, and I'm a risk taker anyway. So,
you probably didn't
but
think
I
it was
just
risky,
was.
right?
I just had to do it. There was no thought about what if we don't succeed, because I didn't have success in my mind. It was just this thing I had to do. Something I wanted to make.
Turns out that's how a lot of expert entrepreneurs think.
It's actually kind of the Ben and Jerry's of coffee.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the same type of approach. Can you tell us, how did Boxcar, the name, resonate with you?
Well, this is actually too long of a story. I wanted to open a place when I was living in Berkeley, California, and I was always talking about how coffee could be so much more than just this dark roasted thing. There's so much more going on. There's all these different nuances and different types of coffee from different countries. And a friend of mine said, why don't you open a little kiosk in the parking lot of the Monterey Market up there in North Berkeley? And my friend said, you should just call it Soapbox, because I was always on. There you go. And then we started talking about the Great American Soapbox Derby race.
Yep. Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And that sort of was a kind of a double, not a double. What would it be? It would be like it could be either one. You could choose
dual meanings.
But somebody didn't like the word soap in there. They thought that would be a bad association.
Yeah.
Good point.
It looks
I
cool
agree
in
with
print,
that.
though.
Yeah.
And I thought that was important. So, but then we found that some people call those little wooden cars boxcars.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Story.
But it's such a, and that's like the condensed version. I've had a lot of practice. I used to ramble
This is
on.
your pitch, right?
Oh man, I used to ramble on about it and it didn't make any sense.
That sounds like the rest of our podcast. No, I'm just.
Yeah. But I've gotten to the point where I'm almost ready to just say, when I was a little boy, I was really into my Lionel train set, and the Boxcar was my favorite part of my train set.
That's cool. And what's the future
I
hold
like
for
the
you?
real story.
Are you looking to scale in a bigger way than you are now, or
Yes,
what are you thinking?
I think we have to grow just because I have some folks that work here that I want them to stick around, and I need to find a way to get them more stability in their lives, and hopefully, two of the most important people are wanting to have a baby, and I just want them to be able to live here, and so I need to make the company bigger so that they can work and live here because they like living here.
Yeah.
I'm not really ambitious about making a bunch more money, but I do think there's room for us to grow our wholesale business, and I would like to move our bakery into a really nice little space somewhere in Boulder. We make the best pastries in the state, I think, and nobody knows we even make them.
I didn't know until right now.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so
I've eaten them. I didn't
so
know you
one of
guys made
our
them.
it's all being produced in a 200 square foot room in the back of that building.
Wow.
Sensing a trend here with like things being produced in small rooms at first.
Yeah, and just having to find a way to move them somewhere.
Absolutely.
But yeah, come check those out because they're made fresh every single day. They're one of the, actually Millie, who's just here watching our barista competitor live stream. She pitched this idea to us. She used to work at Frosca and their little pastry, their little like cafe that they had for a little bit, and they closed that. And she pitched the idea, and we always wanted to have pastries that kind of complemented.
Right.
Yeah, like it was up to we had great coffee, but we couldn't find a wholesale situation, and we took a chance, and she's been doing this for years now. So anyway, they're the best.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thank you.
to learn more about the history of this.
Yeah. I just could talk forever about this stuff, but
Well, next time.
next time.
We'll have you back. So if you're coming to Boulder and you want to, drink real local phenomenon coffee that's absolutely delicious, and they also make coffee in really interesting ways. There
That's
too.
true, yeah.
It's almost like it's almost a show to get your coffee made sometime, and not to mention the display. And then there's other things you can buy there. It's just a wonderful place to go in the morning when you're visiting Boulder.
100%. And actually, it's a must-stop
Yes,
store.
yeah, it really is. So that was awesome. I've always liked these guys' product. I've always thought it was amazing. Had no idea anything about the history of the place. Just knew it popped up, and they made great coffee. And I know lots of entrepreneurs hang out there. So now we know quite a bit more.
Well, and think about the journey from garage to this really amazing business. I think it's a common theme that you see when people really believe in what they're doing.
Right.
Money is not. It can't be the initial driver. Right.
Yeah.
And I would say actually something that we could talk about even in academic research if we talked about early entrepreneurial motives. Right, if money's the driver, what's the success rate there versus money being the purpose?
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually a one of the topics in this article that we're going to talk about this week. So, a fresh look at patterns and assumptions in the field of entrepreneurship. What can we learn? By Gary Dushnitsky and Sharon F Matusik, appeared in the Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal recently. So Sharon, you want to tell us a little bit, how did this article come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So both Gary and I are interested in entrepreneurship research that also has a lot of implications for actual entrepreneurs, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And
All
so
right.
one of the things
You're speaking Brad's language.
One of the things that we had been talking about is the fact that if you look at how the world of entrepreneurship has evolved over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of pretty disruptive changes. And then you look at the research that we're doing, and it's kind of building on the same old patterns and the same classic research like Schumpeter's work and Penrose's work. And so our challenge to ourselves was, can we step back and get together a bunch of people who are really active in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, VCs, accelerator firms, entrepreneurs, economic development people, and say, hey, what's changed? And then step back and say, what are the implications of that for how we study entrepreneurship?
Right. And I mean, I think that's something we very rarely do in research. So it's just not, oftentimes we get inspired by a research project, or at least I do, and a lot of authors I know get inspired by talking to an entrepreneur, but they don't necessarily think about asking entrepreneurs and others in the field, hey, what should we be studying?
Yeah. And it was actually, we pulled together a roundtable in Boulder, pulling together some of these great people that are at the coffee shop like Boxcar. And, we structured the whole conversation around, hey, step back and tell us what you think has changed in entrepreneurship over the last 10 or 15 years. And certainly there's a lot of stuff that we still do. For example, business plans, thinking about facilities, how do we build those out? What kind of investors do I want to pitch and things like that. But there's been a lot that's also changed in terms of, how easy it is to get something up and going, what your capital needs are, and just the ready access to lots of different kinds of expertise on a market, so you don't have to employ those people. And so we wanted to kind of step back and say, well, how has it fundamentally changed, and what are the implications of that for how we study entrepreneurship?
And I'll tell you, one of the big changes that I've seen over 10, 15 years, though, is the availability of capital. Right, you have people that are thinking about starting businesses now. They could say, Brad, I have this idea, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to come up with $1 million, 10 million, whatever the number is. And I actually think that that's a misconception now. I think that there's so much excess capital floating around that money follows great ideas.
That, and also if you look at the different ways that capital is bundled with expertise and not bundled with expertise, that's really been a big change. So if you go back, 10 or 15 years and you were really trying to do a capital raise, you might try to pitch, and you might try to pitch a venture capitalist, and they're bringing money and expertise, and they're probably sitting on your board.
And I would say, Sharon, that expertise component is even more important than the money component.
For sure. But now they're decoupled. Right. And so you have some options where they're still bundled, but you can go to, think about pitching a VC where you get both of those together, or you can crowdfund where you get just the money.
That's right.
Or you can go to an accelerator where you get mostly just the expertise and the advice and the mentoring.
Or an angel investor group. Those didn't exist. And
so there's a whole different set of options.
That's right.
And what are the implications of that? How does that influence what kind of ventures get funded, which kinds of ventures don't get funded? And, at the end of the day, there's probably more capital out there. It's easier to get. So is that good or is that bad? Some people would argue that some businesses that should never have gotten funding can now get funding. And, does that push people into positions that maybe is not ideal?
And it's trickling all the way up to the IPO market, right? Because some of these companies, like if we take Uber, Airbnb, they've had such massive funding early on where normally they'd have to go to the IPO market to get that they're already there. It's a different world.
Yeah, well, and I think that's driving some of the movement to actually look at profitability.
No way!
Crazy
about making money.
I know. I'm getting out there. As a veteran of the .com boom, I can remember when it was like, hey, look, I drew this thing. It's going to be on the internet. And people are like, oh, okay. Well, that sounds good.
Right.
So that was really, that was really. But okay, so this paper, I think what I like about it a lot. especially for this podcast, is I think it's trying to ask the very same questions that I've been struggling with in trying to communicate to Brad, with differing some degrees of success, purely my own fault.
First or second drink, I think.
Yeah. Why entrepreneurship? And this is sort of this paper almost acts as a meta framework for what we've been doing on this podcast. And so 3 areas that are identified in the paper are the nature of opportunity, scaling, and funding. And I was sitting here as we were talking to Vaj, and I was thinking about the nature of opportunity. And one of our alums of the Leeds School, PhD alum Sharon Alvarez, is very famous for putting forth this framework with co-authors, mainly Jay Barney, on created versus discovered opportunities. And so when we were listening to Vaj, I was just thinking, like, this is not a discovered opportunity. Nobody could look at the Boulder market and say, oh my gosh, there's just an arbitrage opportunity to create coffee in Boulder because there's like 15 coffee shops and clearly we need another one. It's what he did. It's very different.
Yeah, and I think really along those lines, a lot of what we heard when we sat down with people from the ecosystem to talk about how things have changed is the theme that came out again and again is this execution is everything. You know, so good ideas are a dime a dozen.
That's right.
And if you think back to, 20, 30 years ago, there were much more opportunities for information asymmetry. So something specialized, I don't know it. So you have an opportunity to really build that out and run with that. Now with information being absolutely everywhere all the time, it's the opposite, right? So the ideas are all out there, but how are you actually going to act on those opportunities and exploit those opportunities and execute on those opportunities? And, as we were just talking about with Boxcar, it was not just the coffee. It's the coffee, it's the experience, it's the location, it's how they interact with their suppliers and the whole story behind that becomes really critical in terms of building a business around that idea. Just coming up with another idea for roasting coffee isn't enough.
Right. It's the uniqueness of the building, the place, the sense of, this is a premium product, there's care, there's authenticity. And I think that's, as entrepreneurship educators, that kind of gives me a lot of hope, actually. And we don't have, I'd say there's a handful of more execution-based theories, right? So there's, of course, the creation versus discovery, but there's also effectuation and bricolage. And the nice thing about those approaches, oh God, I'm getting academic. I'll stop, Brad.
It's okay. I was looking for my bourbon. It is 5 o'clock.
So what I'm trying to get at, okay, I'll make myself. And they gave me coffee this time instead of whiskey. So
this is a problem.
More like pointy-headed. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, hey, the idea is it matters, but what really matters is what you do with it.
That's exactly right.
An opportunity is an idea plus action. And the cool thing, I think, as educators, we can teach people how to execute. Now, whether or not they do that is up to them. Right. But there are ways to teach that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to teach someone to have a great idea.
Well, and I think it opens up a whole different set of things to study in terms of the entrepreneurship realm to really be able to dial that down and help people increase the odds that their businesses are going to be successful.
So that's the point right there. That's the point we're all trying to reach for, right? Is right now the data says 1 out of 10 succeeds. And if we can increase that percentage, now we've helped the guy on the street.
Right.
So what would be the takeaway that you think from your work that you would say that directly could affect this?
Well, to me, the whole purpose of this is to try to stimulate more research in areas that have implications. So I would say, kind of to Jeff's point, we need to do more work on that execution piece. We've spent a lot of time on that opportunity discovery piece. And not to say there aren't some additional contributions that can be made there, but if you look at where we should spend our time and energy, there's a lot of uncharted territory on that. How do you really execute effectively?
Right.
And how do you create opportunities and build from those?
That's right.
Yep.
I love that. But there are a lot of people in their garages right now doing kind of what Raj was doing, saying, move a little faster, please, guys.
Absolutely.
Right. And telling those people, hey, you should write a business plan might not be the best advice. Yet, I know in our programs, we've of course, a business plan is a valuable tool, but it's the artifact of going through business planning. It's not
Correct.
the plan.
It's understanding the fundamentals
Right.
of what makes your business
Being
tick.
able to
And it's that
communicate about your
classic,
business.
you've got to get the product out there, you've
Yes.
got to test it, you've got
That's
to
right.
refine it, and
Right.
you've got to be able to adjust on the fly
Right.
and
right.
use that to drive things forward.
Writing a business plan for something you've never executed on
No,
is a little bit
it's
pointless.
Yeah, but
Though people do have to think through
Of
what are
course,
they
of
trying
course,
to do,
of course.
because I do think there's a risk on the other
Yeah,
side as
yeah,
well, that
sure,
if you just go
of
out
course.
there
Oh,
and
no,
like,
no,
I'm gonna
no.
try
Just
all
do
this
stuff. It's cool.
Yeah.
Like that's how many people misinterpret the whole creation and discovery, effectuation, bricolage, all of these, or the lean startup even. People misinterpret that as meaning like just go do some stuff and it'll be fine.
Right.
And it's not. It's all of those are very specific methodologies that can be taught. They're not just go do things and it'll work out.
Right.
but they're not a blanket. Do this and you're guaranteed success.
No,
but the
nothing
bottom
can be
line for
that.
me, so I would say my approach to both of you is an agile engineering
Yes.
focus with your pulse always on your customers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Design thinking, all
Yes.
of these tools are
Right.
empathy. And I feel like that's kind of one of the cool things that count when we were talking about Vaj. I think he is the person that cares about this.
There is no question that he gives a shit about his business.
Yeah, exactly.
But not about the financial benefits of his business.
about the
but
quality.
The quality of his product.
Absolutely. And the other thing that came out when we were having our roundtable is how visible entrepreneurs' actions are now.
Yes,
And
that's- I
so
wanted
this
to ask you
idea of
about
the
that. Yeah,
commitment
yeah.
and that mission and that, do you care about your, how you're sourcing your
Right.
product
Sure.
and your employees? There's endless amounts of information on every entrepreneur. You've got
Yep.
your LinkedIn page, you've got a website, people are following you on Twitter. So it's more than just running the business. Everything that you do is a reflection on the brand and the company. So that
course.
also introduces a whole different
Right.
set of considerations that you didn't really have if you go back
Yeah,
20 years,
yeah.
because
But
what
I
you
think-
did outside of work was not nearly as visible.
I agree, but I think Boulder's different. So Sharon and I are both from Chicago or Chicago area. And when I was working in Chicago, if I'd walked out with some new component for my businesses that I'd spend a lot of money on, someone would want to knife you in the elevator to get that work. And in Boulder, you can walk down the street and they go, I'm done with this, here you go.
Yeah.
So the collaboration aspect is really important here.
And that's one of the things that I think is so special about Boulder, and I talk about this all the time when I'm trying
It's
to get
true.
new faculty to come to
yeah,
see
it's
you
not-
or students. There's so much this pay it forward orientation
Yes.
and this, let's just work together and
Right.
we'll elevate everything
That's
that
right.
we do together. And I think there's some, one, it's the people who are here.
Right.
Two, I think there's something kind of special about the size of Boulder.
Yeah.
We're 120,000-ish people, and there's
Right.
really only about 2 degrees of separation between
That's
anyone.
absolutely
Really true.
But like if I don't know that person, I'm going to call
Somebody does.
you, and you probably
Yeah.
know him, or you probably
You start
know
getting
him.
introduced to people you've
Right.
known for 5 years.
And then you've got a few, really key people in the ecosystem who very much feel
Absolutely.
strongly about this pay it forward orientation.
Yeah.
So if you blow me off all the time when I try to meet with you,
done.
Word gets out.
I know.
What's
It's
up
a-
with
it's a
Brad?
small-
He
it's a
won't
small
take the
community.
time.
Yeah.
And so when you have that kind of a connection across people and that pay it forward orientation, I think it's really pretty special. And you don't get that in
Yeah.
the Silicon Valleys
don't.
and the Chicagos and
New
the
York's,
Boston Route
right.
128 area.
Right. So that collaboration component, though, the part of the ecosystem is also another one of these ways to help you execute.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's that executing, that scaling piece.
Right.
And, a lot of what we heard too was the nature of the kinds of expertise that people are looking for when they're trying to scale up
Right.
is different.
That's
If you
really
if you look back in time, it was you have the technical skills.
That's
I
right.
need those. I'm going to hire you.
Right.
But now there's much more of an open market for that, and that's not necessarily differentiating.
Right.
But what I care about is you've been through this kind of experience. Back to your introduction of Brad in the beginning of the podcast. You've been an entrepreneur in all these different sectors, or you've funded
Right.
entrepreneurs in these different sectors. So you have that ability to kind of say, oh, well, this isn't really going where we want it to go. And oh my gosh, we've got all these pressures on our budget, et cetera, et cetera. Let's try this, let's try that. So that ability and that experience to kind of be agile and move things forward in a different path.
Right.
That's what we're hearing is really valuable, as opposed to you have this specific industry expertise or this technical expertise.
But that's-
It's more, it's a very different kind of orientation in terms of, what do you need to really scale things up?
I
Because
can't
there's
tell
so
if,
much more
if
that's
Jeff is
available on the
agreeing
market.
or if he's disagreeing.
No, I'm absolutely agreeing. I think that's like really encouraging as an entrepreneurship educator. Because, you end up in these discussions. I don't know if any of our listeners can relate to this. And they mean well. And we're talking to our finance or accounting colleagues, not to slam on those professions, but that's a very technical skill set. Right. It's kind of like, not kind of, it's mathematics and algebra. Right. It's like, this is right, this is wrong. But it doesn't cause you to really think about operating under ambiguity, under uncertainty, under stress, other than the assumptions you make. And that, I think, is a huge, important part of what entrepreneurship education does. Is you take students and say, like, I don't know how to tell you to make this work. We're going to collaborate together. And of course, there's criteria, grading, and everything else involved. But, this is a class about how do you act under uncertainty. At least that's how I frame it a lot of the time.
And if you look at those specialized technical skill sets, it's not to say that they are.
Oh, no, you have to have them.
Or you can get them on the market.
Well, that's true.
So that's the other thing too. There's so many, either apps or ways to contract talent that we didn't have if you go back in time.
Right.
So if I need a technical expert in a certain area, I can hire someone on a contract to do that.
That's right.
Easily.
Or if I need to set up a web page, I can use Wix and off I go, and I don't have to hire my own developer to maintain my website.
Yeah.
So that's really an option that wasn't available if you go back 10, 15 years.
And you guys actually say this, if I can quote from the paper. First, as the cost of entry decreases, one may expect increased competition. It begs the question, in a world where many firms draw on the same resources, how do firms differentiate and compete?
Right.
And I think that's a question we don't know much about.
Right.
Because we're so used to taking a resource-based view and saying, it's because of your unique and imitable resources that you're able to compete effectively. Well, if everybody has the same access, again, it comes back to execution in some ways, perhaps.
And it gets back to your point about being
and
agile.
authenticity.
Two things. So authenticity is a big thing for me, and I think it's people recognize that in businesses, right? Customers recognize whether being sold a bill of goods or if somebody truly believes it.
Right.
But I also, I'd like to add one more component into the discussion, and that's we all live within our life horizons, right? So if you came over and immigrated and lived in New York City in the early 1900s, you may only know this one block. You have the corner bakery, and you know those people there. And so really expanding your horizons through these life experiences, I think actually gives you that better sense of being able to execute and a better understanding of the entire marketplace and the lay of the land, because all these other skills are so easily available.
But as the paper points out, it's not a human capital story in the way we traditionally think of human capital as your educational attainment or something like that. Maybe we need all different measures of thinking about this. And there's been this movement in entrepreneurship research to not equate the entrepreneur and the venture. The venture may fail. Right. That doesn't mean the entrepreneur is failed, because they're likely to have a lot of success in their next round. I mean, that's what most of the statistics tell us. So, okay, third topic, resource acquisition. There's so many, as you alluded to earlier, Sharon, so many different ways of getting funding, yet we don't know that much about what are generalizable insights about using these platforms.
Right. And and we started to talk a little bit about this before. I think there's some interesting things that have changed, such as decoupling the expertise and the money.
Right.
And what are all the implications of that? And there's also these different forms of funding that require different ways of managing your investor relationships.
Right.
So, boy, it seems like crowdfunding is an easy way to go, but oh my gosh, then you've got thousands of people who want an update on how you're doing.
Herding cats is not the word, right?
We're going to launch our Kickstarter.
Right.
We have to actually deliver.
And we know that one of the things that contributes to failure is if you're actually oversubscribed, because then you can't keep up with all. You're way over your skis in terms of being able to manage those relationships. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities out there, but how do we make sense of all that? They're different from what we're used to. You're able to get smaller amounts more easily, so that has pros and cons. And then looking at how these different funding sources interact with one another. So, say I get some early crowdfunding money, what does that mean later on when I go to get some equity capital? And what does that mean later still if I want to go to the IPO market or sell out to a buyer or a partner? All those things and how they interact with one another. We're just really starting to understand some of those dynamics, and there's a lot of room to advance our knowledge in that area.
So basically, and this is how I distilled it down, but you feel free to correct. So we have to take a little bit different lens on this kind of research. I think it is useful to an entrepreneur reading it in that it tells them, hey, we have a limited understanding of some of these new emerging areas. It's great to see that level of honesty in a paper and coming out like this. And for us academics, I don't know, Brad, what do you think? We need to understand better where opportunity comes from.
I don't think the uncertainty is a surprise, though.
No.
Right?
But understanding at a more nuanced level. So getting out of this idea that opportunity is like arbitrage.
Okay.
And understanding how people actually engage in action to foster opportunity. We just don't use that a lot in entrepreneurship research. So this is more like prescriptions, and you can tell us if you think this direction should go.
So I think the takeaway for me is that if you're an entrepreneur, and remember, we're talking about entrepreneurship in the under the lens of starting a business. We have 3 people from the business school here, but entrepreneurship does not live at the business school.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, it's all around us.
So with that in mind, if you're going to come up with your idea and you really believe in it, you want to dedicate your life to it, right? In a sense, it's a partnership, it's a marriage. That understanding that the execution component is incredibly important, that's the takeaway for me.
Okay, cool. You did a better job, as usual, of distilling it down than I did. And then looking at I think that ties directly into the scaling. I mean, to me, it's like, that is just the natural linkage. Like, you've got to execute early on your idea, but then you also have to execute on scaling. And I don't know, gosh, maybe I just missed it, but I don't know that we have a whole lot comparing when some ventures scale more quickly than others and how that happens. We tend to look at entry, right?
Right.
And so that's another thing, like that comes into something translatable. And then finally, I think it's this part of the paper is very much methodological. We don't understand how different forms of funding, especially the more emergent ones, most of the studies that are done on like one platform.
That's right.
So here's how this works on this platform. But there's other studies showing that doesn't generalize.
And every platform is a little bit different than the others in terms of the dynamics of what you need to put out there and how you can get the money or not get the money and all that.
But funding, I would say, is really needs to be looked under the lens that what is the entrepreneur's goal? Yes. Is their goal just 5 years and out? Right? They want that exit. Do they want to build a business over generations? Yeah. And so there's some other nuances just besides where does the funding land, and your path and funding actually need to be aligned. I guess is how.
Sounds good to me. So that's Sharon. Anything else you would say about the paper?
No, I guess one of the things that we hope comes out of it is just more ongoing dialogue between academics and the entrepreneurial ecosystem to better understand, what are the current issues out there? How are we thinking about them as academics? And how do we need to shift our thinking? And if we can facilitate more of those conversations, I think it's better for entrepreneurs. I think it's better for academics. Absolutely. And so that's one of the things that we hope people will take away from the paper.
Are there next steps for the paper? Is it kind of like you're getting feedback and then go back at it?
Well, it's interesting because we just did a shortened version of this, and we're trying to get the word out more about some of these ideas, and we're hoping that
all 4 of our listeners were going to go.
That's so good.
They're going to pull this up.
Well, we're hoping to see more research in some of these areas that we've identified. Getting people to step back from some of these classic assumptions and say what still holds, what doesn't hold, and how do we drive that forward.
Right. No, awesome. I think that's wonderful. I think there's all sorts, and from an academic perspective, I think the more we do that, the more we actually end up with original ideas that are more likely to be published anyway.
Right.
So, that's kind of
and as we were talking about in the beginning, I think a lot of academics who are attracted to entrepreneurship.
Yes.
At their root, they have this drive to not only understand things from a rigorous academic perspective, but they do want to make a difference.
That's right.
And they do want to provide some knowledge that's useful to entrepreneurs and VCs.
And entrepreneurs are thirsty for the knowledge coming out of academics and out of all the universities, and they're looking for a translatable and actionable research to help them.
Yeah.
Well, great. And that's what we'll keep working on here on Creative Distillation. So, Sharon, thank you so much
My
for being
pleasure.
here.
Thank you.
This was great.
It's really fun.
And we will be back with more actionable insights from entrepreneurship research. Hopefully, lots of people will respond to the call of this paper, and then they'll publish their papers, and we can get them on here.
That would be
and
great.
then they can face off against Brad. Just always a good time.
It's not that bad.
No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you both for being here. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Thanks again to Boxcar Coffee Roasters for having us. This is a wonderful thing. It's now 5 o'clock on a Friday. I just drank a cup of really strong coffee, so I'm going to go annoy my wife for the rest of the evening. So anyway, thanks a lot. Okay.